Hello, it's Eamon McAuley here for Belfast Boxers, and I'm with the Celtic Warrior, Steve Collins. Steve was world champion in 2 weight divisions and made 7 successful defences of a super middleweight title. He is the most successful boxer ever to come out of Ireland. So I'm just going to fire the 10 questions here to Steve. Steve, how and why did you get into the sport?
Well, it's family history. I had an uncle who was Irish heavyweight champion, Irish middleweight champion. He actually was in the army, British Army for a while, and I only found out recently he won 2 heavyweight titles in the British Army as well, the Irish Guards. So that was my mother's side of the family. My mother's brothers boxed, and then my father's side, my father boxed Pascal Collins. The first live amateur boxing match I was shown on Irish television was my father fighting in the Leinster final, and he won it. My uncle Terry was probably the original Raging Bull, fought everybody. So boxing was very much something I inherited. As a kid, I would follow my dad, my uncles and cousins to the boxing gym, the old Max McCullough gym in Corinthian in Dublin. And of course I'd participate, join in, take part, hit the bags, etc. And I had my first fight in that gym in Garba Street in Dublin inner city at 8 years of age, my first fight. And when that fight happened and it took place, it was magic. The memory is so strong in my mind. I can recall it like it was only last week. I remember that first bout, the feeling, the buzz, the achievement of winning, and whoever it was about it, I decided there and then that's what I wanted to do.
Who was the biggest influence in your career?
Oh, my dad. Actually, my dad was, but my mum was a major influence in my career. My mum loved boxing and she was a big supporter. I think I was in training camp from the day I started boxing with my mum because she made sure I ate right, slept right and trained correct, and my dad was there too. So my parents were big fans of boxing and great supporters, and they influenced me a lot.
Who was the hardest puncher you ever faced?
Oh, Nigel Benn, without a doubt. Nigel Benn, you meet a lot of, I fought heavyweight, from middleweight to heavyweight I fought, but nobody had hit me with the same
power. Maybe McCallum was more accurate.
It's not power. It was almost like a penetrating kind of power, kind of a sickening, not a nice feeling. Nigel Benn was the one that hit and gave me those feelings that I didn't enjoy at all.
What was your best moment in boxing?
Best moment in boxing was beating Chris Eubank for the first time.
Who was your greatest or toughest trainer?
I wouldn't say I've been lucky to have only been with great trainers. Started off with the Petronellis. I then went with Jimmy Tibbs for a while in East London. Jimmy Tibbs was a hard taskmaster. He was probably the one guy that pushed me more than anybody. I was only waiting for a short stint. I didn't like being in the UK. I wanted to return to America. I then went back and trained with Floyd Patterson. I learned a lot from Floyd Patterson. After Floyd Patterson, then I finished in America, moved to Belfast, and had great times with Bernard Checker, who was a big influence. Alongside Bernard Checker was John Breen, who was rather more than a boxing coach. He was a training coach. He used to push me very hard. He'd keep watching you and make you do the extra presso. After Bernard Checker, then I went to London. I was training with Freddie King, who never probably got the credit he deserved. Was a very, very good coach, and I picked up a hell of a lot from him. And then from Freddie Roach, from Freddie King, I then went to my old buddy from Boston, who was a top trainer at the time, on the way up, Freddie Roach. And Freddie Roach and I kind of brought everything I'd learned in the past, we brought it all together under his tuition, and that's where I had my best success. But all the coaches and trainers I've been with, I've learned something from all of them. Sometimes I didn't stay with them. It was never a personal thing. It was usually down to management, promotion, or business. But I've always been happy with my coaches, and every coach I've had has had an input in the finished product, which is what I was. On the night I fought Chris Eubank, I felt on that night everything I'd learned from my professional career came together that night.
At the start of every fight, you touch gloves and you give your respect. Although the fight may be very tough, do you still feel the same animosity after the fight?
Just doesn't feel what?
Animosity or,
No.
you know?
No, it was never personal, it was business.
Well, what about Chris Eubank? How do you get along with Chris Eubank today?
Chris Eubank's the best thing that ever happened to us in our division. He's the best thing that happened to me in my career. I think he's great for boxing. There's not enough Americans and Chris Eubanks around. Frank Bruno's, there's not enough characters in the game.
But as a person, as a friend, is he easy to get on with?
I'm getting to that. Right. I'm building you up. Personally, I don't know him. Sometimes.
Does anybody know him?
I disagree. I don't like some of the things he says because they're not true. But rather than get upset or annoyed by some of the rubbish that comes out, I just tend to say, well, that's Chris Eubank. It doesn't really mean anything to me, you know, what he says, you know. But I can't comment on his personality. Well, his personality I can, but on his personal life because I don't live with him. But as a fighter, he was a great influence and a big plus to boxing.
Absolutely. What do you want to be remembered for in your boxing career? What would you like to be remembered for?
Well, what I say to people is it was never easy for me. You know, I beat a lot of guys with more talent than me. I beat a lot of guys, you know, with more ability, but I worked really hard to achieve what I achieved. And I just want to say, you know, that I never took any shortcuts. I like to believe I done it the hard way, which was the best way, and all my hard work and determination paid off. I mean, you got to realise I was just before my 31st birthday when I fought Chris Eubank. You know, when I fought Mike McAuley, he was 31 years old. I thought he was an old man, but when I was 31, that's when I peaked in my career. So it took me a while to get there, but I got there in the end, and I never stopped trying.
Who was your favourite boxer, and why?
I would think a young Roberto Duran was my favourite fighter. Roberto Duran in his days when he was a lighter weight, you know, coming up to his first fight with Leonard, that era, up until then, around that time, was when Roberto Duran was at his best, and I liked him a lot. Julio Cesar Chavez, another guy I had great time for, whose style and method in the ring, I learned a lot from him, watched and picked up a lot from watching him. Another great fighter.
Any advice for up-and-coming boxers? Your son's actually boxing at the minute.
Yeah.
He's doing quite well. Do you have an input on
My son, Stevie, had a great future, professional rugby career. He had time with the London Irish, he had time with the Wasps. Sean Edwards was one of the best coaches in the world. Reckon he was going to be the next great thing out of Ireland. A lot of time for him, you see the potential there. And then out of the blue, my son came to my brother Pascal and I and said that he wants to give up rugby and become a boxer. We were taken aback because he was in his early 20s, no boxing career at all behind him, no amateur career. But he was determined to do it, and we weren't going to stop him. We just said, well, okay, he's going to do it, let's guide him. We didn't want to go the amateur route because there's too much politics involved in amateur. It's a great sport, but it's run by people who do more good, you know, damage to the game than good, unfortunately. But what I love about amateur boxing are the amateur boxers and the people's characters in the gyms who train them and prepare them. Because the politics in amateur boxing is just too much for me. I can't handle it. So we decided that we wouldn't put him in the amateur game because we'd have no control over his fights. Where in the pro game we could pick his fights and let him progress at the pace we want him to progress. And he has shocked us and surprised us how much natural talent he has. And I'm not saying it because he's my son, but he's one to watch out for because he's just improving and progressing so well. We're very excited about what the future he has ahead of him.
Oh well, we'll be looking out for him for sure. Thanks very much for talking about Belfast.
He's under a lot of pressure, Stevie is, you know, because people make comparisons to him, which is very unfair. Like Chris Eubank's son, people make comparisons to Chris Eubank Jr. and Sr., which is very unfair because Chris Eubank Jr. is a hell of a fighter. He's not his dad, he is his own fighter, and he is
a damn good fighter.
And he's a very good fighter. He's a great heart, great determination, a tough kid, and he will get better. And my son's in the same boat as him. People will always make comparisons. Well, personally, I think my son's got more talent than I ever had because he's picked it up late, and he's going to progress very fast, and he definitely will be something to watch in the future.
And Nazel Ben's son's boxing pro too, isn't he?
Yeah, Connor. And it's funny because Connor and my son Stevie have been friends on Facebook for a long, long time. They're very close, they're really good mates. And at the last show we had in London, Conor came in and Stevie was there. And, you know, it's just nice to see that these kids get on so well. And I just thought it's great, you know, myself and Nigel Ben get on really well. I had a great time for Nigel Ben. He's a very good man. He's you know, there's a lot there. It's positive. And I just think it's funny that his son and my son are very good mates.
Any regrets in your boxing career?
The only regret I have is I hung around, you know, for the extra year or so, you know, as a professional for the Roy Jones fight. It never happened, and I've done everything in my power for it to happen. And I regret not that fight happening when we were both at our best. I think it would have been a great fight, but it was out of my control. I mean, like, you can't make a man fight if he doesn't want to fight. And but I'm still ready for Roy Jones. You know, one of these days he might get the courage to accept my challenge. If he does, I'll be always ready for him.
Thanks for talking to Belfast Boxers, Steve.
Thank you. I've been to Ardine. I've done the open deck bus.
Leganeel.
Yeah.
My uncle Sean.
Wonderful people. Great gym up there, and very warm, very tight community. And it's a better place now than it was when I first went to Belfast in the early 80s, late 70s, and they're lovely people, and I wish them all the best. And
Sean was blew away with you. He really was. He thought you were lovely, and you are lovely. Steve, thanks very much.
You make a lovely cup of tea in that gym. Maybe I might get the invite up there again sometime.
Hopefully, you're always welcome. Always welcome. Come up and see Rinty's statue.
Yeah. I never. My amateur career, to me, was. It might sound funny, I loved boxing, but I never really enjoyed my amateur career. I always felt it was a very frustrating time for me, boxing amateur, because I just felt I had a mindset and a mentality, and it just didn't seem to suit me, the amateur games. I always preferred to tear it up, and I always preferred, you know, more time. I mean, I love sparring. I've sparred guys for 6 rounds, I had a great time, but the amateurs then and now, I look upon amateurs as a skillful
apprenticeship,
a skillful boxing game, whereas I look at the pro game as a fighting game. You know, in pro games you have to know how to fight, and you have to know, you know, after 10, 12 rounds in the ring with one person, you have to be durable and you have to be able to hold your own. And it is a fight, whereas in boxing, there's so many successful amateurs steal titles, and then, you know, they can be very successful in the amateur game. And, you know, come along to the professional game, it's like, you know, it's a totally different sport. And vice versa, there's guys in amateur games who do not succeed or don't shine as amateurs, but are more suited for the pro games. But I gave myself an ambition as an amateur that I wanted to win every amateur title available to me, you know, from juniors to seniors, and I wanted to represent my country and fight the Olympic Games. And all my ambitions as an amateur were practically fulfilled. When it came to the Olympic selection, I never understood why I was never included in the Olympic squad, because I had wins against, I beat England, Scotland, Wales, but the biggest win I had as an amateur was against an Eastern Bloc country, a guy called Zoltan Fuzzy from Hungary, who I believe was a silver medalist in the Europeans, and good southpaw, and I beat him convincingly, and I thought, right, this is my ticket now for the Olympic squad. But it never happened. So the frustration then was there's no point in me hanging around anymore. My ambition and my goals were to be world champion. I had no doubt in my mind from the time I was 8 years old when I had my first fight, that's where I was going to go. And I realised and accepted that amateur career, I was going to wait around another 4.5, 5 years for the next Olympic Games. I had a very good job. I was a qualified electrician, and I had the qualifications that would probably carry me anywhere in the world, and I decided it was time then to up sticks and go to the United States, where the best professionals at the time were. And the world champion at that particular time was a guy called Marvin Hagler, who I admired as a professional fighter. I watched him, although he was different build, different, you know, southpaw. I honestly believe in my heart and soul that his style of fighting was a style that would suit me. So I packed my bags and I went to the Petronelli gym in Brockton, Massachusetts.
The audacity of you, I mean,
the Americans are great. You walk into the gym, it doesn't matter whether you're 25 years old or 45 years old. If you come into the gym, you want to fight, they give you the opportunity to fight. They won't say, you know, you're young or too old or too X, Y, Z. They will always give you the opportunity to fight in America, and Americans are very positive. And when I came into the gym and told them who I was, where I was going to be, and I was the next middleweight champion of the world, they went, "That's great, welcome to our gym." Yeah. But at the same time, they're not fools. I was put to the test quite soon afterwards with some of the top pros in the gym. They stuck me in to see how I could handle myself in with a hardened, seasoned professional. I obviously did handle myself, and before I knew it, they signed me up to a contract, which I was more than delighted to sign at the time, but came back to bite me in the behind years later.
But you never got sparring Marvelous Marvin?
Now, Marvin was in the gym training. It was such an honour to share a gym with your idol and watch him on the bag. You know, a couple of times he picked up my towel and wiped the sweat with my towel and apologised and realised it was my towel on one occasion, and I said, "Marvin, it's absolutely no problem, I'll keep that towel, I'll frame it," you know. But I wanted to spar with him. This is a couple of years into my professional career. I wanted to spar with Marvin, and he wouldn't spar with me. And I kind of felt a bit, you know, I thought, you know, oh, he's afraid of me, joking, but I just couldn't understand why he wouldn't spar me. And that memory came back to me about 10, 12 years later. I was in the very same scenario as Marvin Hagler in training camp in the Channel Islands, and I used to invite young prospects, amateurs over to spend time in training camp with us to get experience, you know. And one of the kids was a very ambitious, quite decent amateur middleweight, like heavyweight, I'm not sure. Very cocky, you know, fancied himself as a good fighter and wanted to spar me. And I said to Freddie, I'm not sparring that kid because he's a bit, you know, full of himself, and he will try it on. And I don't want to hurt a kid because I like him. Yeah. When I said that, all of a sudden I went
back to Marvin
Hagler. I understand now where he was coming from, because I walked into that gym and I kind of told them all, "I'm the new kid in the block, I'm going to take over this gym. Marvin Hagler, watch out," you know. And it was fun, but he sensed it, and behind it was truth. And so Marvin, for my sake, Marvin decided not to spar me because he didn't want to hurt me. And I thank him for that, you know.
Have you kept in touch over the years? Would he make a fuss of you if he seen you now?
I think Marvin Hagler needs to make a fuss of anybody being Marvin Hagler, but I know...
Well, sometimes he's a bit aloof.
Funny enough, my friend's wife is a air hostess on British Airways, and she came across him quite recently on one of the flights, and he introduced herself and told him that she was a very good friend of mine. And he kind of, you know, he said, "Oh, how's Steve doing? What's going on? Pass on my best to him." The respect is there. Fighters respect fighters. The respect is there. I have great respect for him. He was a person who I you know, tried to imitate in my career, and he had a big influence on me. And I don't keep that a secret. So he obviously came to some of my fights. He saw my fight with Sam Story when I won the Irish title and the Boston professional title.
St. Patrick's Day.
He was there, cheering me on. So, you know, he knew a little bit about me, and he respects me, and it's nice to have that respect that fighters have for each other.